then basically roll call. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today. I know we had a little bit of a as we always do, challenge with getting everyone together on the same page. I promise to make this a really brief meeting, sort of a reminder meeting, but right now we'll just call the meeting to order for our first annual 2021 PPI meeting. We in the PPI document, we've said we will have 2 meetings. So this is the first of the 2, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about why we need more this year. And so we'll get started with the roll call on who exactly is here. I've been trying to check off as I see people come in. Megan, I think I have, if I have not checked you here, I'm going to go ahead and call your name. And if you're present, if you would just unmute and let me know you're here, that way I can make sure that you're checked off on our sign-in sheet. So Megan with Isla Murata, are you present? Or if somebody else sees her, you can speak up as well. All right, Jay Hall. I believe Jay wasn't going to be available today. Mel. Michelle White.
Present.
Mike.
I'm here, present.
Here, we were speaking. Rebecca. I don't think Rebecca was going. Oh, Rebecca,
I'm
great.
here.
Scott? All right, what about Teresa? And Mary Beth. Okay, and Kevin is joining us. He's a stand-in, an alternate for us today for Key West. If you are not on the committee member list, if you would please type your name into the chat. And George and Brian, before we sign off, I'd like to make sure that I can capture all those names, so I'll add them to the roll. Did I miss it? Just going to call one more time. If your name is not X'd in the present box right here, and you are present, if you could unmute and let me know, I would appreciate it. If you're having trouble with your computer, go ahead and just email me and I will mark you present after the meeting. Okay?
I'm present. My computer
Just real quick.
Who's speaking? I'm sorry.
Megan, I'm sorry.
Oh, Megan. Okay. That's okay. And this is something we're going to have to be careful to do since, you know, the recording can't necessarily see us. We're really going to have to be careful about making sure that we state our name. And if you could catch me on that as well, because I'm not very good at it. So today, let's be careful about making sure that we say who we are when we start to speak. If you'll help me with that, I greatly appreciate it.
This is Brian, whose phone number is 305-741-7373.
That's me, Rebecca Horan.
Okay.
I'm going to rename you.
All right. I imagine Scott will be joining us at some point here, but we'll just leave it as is. And we'll close this and we'll go on to our next order of business, which would be the agenda. Actually, we should have done the agenda first, but so we did the roll call. You can cross out number 2 on the agenda that I sent this morning if you opened that. We are going to talk about the committee members and any updates that need to be made and how we're going to handle those going forward, or discuss how we would like to handle them going forward. We're also going to go over briefly the annual outreach requirements, just as a reminder for those folks who are still getting their outreach projects out for the PPI. We're going to discuss briefly the flood preparation messages that we want to have ready to go, because we are now officially in storm season, as we're painfully aware now, with a tropical issue out there, even affecting the Panhandle for us. Insurance agent addresses. I think we we're able to get those. I think Mel gets those for us every year, but we need to talk about that. And then the upcoming update, as I promised, why we're going to need to have a couple more meetings this year. If you can believe it, we're coming up on 5 years of working on this program for public information. So moving right into updating the committee members, we were just looking at the committee as it stands right now with some alternates here. You do need to make sure that you're sending at least 2 folks from your committee, your appointed committee, or however you're choosing to come up with your committee members, and at least half of those folks that you send to the meeting must be from outside of local government. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at maybe giving us an alternate or someone that could stand in, or changing committee members, and especially who's going to attend these meetings, because that's very important for everyone to be able to keep the credit for the PPI. And going forward, when we start to make the changes, we are going to have to make sure that we have a full committee from your appointed committee, from your community, so that we can do these updates and that you can be included in that. So just as a reminder, be thinking about that when we start talking about, what we're going to be doing toward the end of the year for the update. So make sure you're cognizant of what we need to do for those folks that need to attend the meeting. And please feel free to, as always, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in here if you have any questions or additions, things you'd like to talk about with the committee as we're going through this agenda. Please feel free to chime in here. So that's that for that particular subject matter. Now let's talk about the annual outreach. We're going to go to the actual PPI and just take a look at it for a brief moment as a reminder. The annual outreach projects that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that your community is responsible for making sure it gets disseminated on an annual basis. So just keep that in mind. If you haven't done these this year, at some point you're going to need to do them, and you're going to need to do them ideally before your recertification comes around, which that for us, unfortunately, happens over the holidays, over the Christmas holidays. So right after we get back, those are due. But certainly we have targeted some dates here. The schedule is not hard fast. If you don't get it out on those dates, that doesn't mean you're not participating in the PPI. That just means something, there was a reason that we as a community changed how we're going to, or when we're going to disseminate those outreach projects. Again, in light of, looking at having to update this as you're going through this list this year, make sure that you're thinking going forward, what's working, what's not. One of the things that there are some things on here that I know we're not getting credit, like websites. I'm not sure about the firm workshops, but we have to think about replacements for these because we're looking at CRS credit for these outreach projects. And if you're new to the group, that's okay. At the end of the year, you'll have a really good idea of how this all works together when we get done with the update. Just as another reminder, each one of those outreach projects we have decided which ones will have the appropriate messages, and these are the messages that must be included in those outreach projects. And of course, these are the outreach at the top here. These are the outreach projects that are designated to have these different messages. They could have more messages. More messages are always good, but this is what we've committed to in the PPI, and your community is committed to participate in the PPI. Then these are the messages you want to be sure you're disseminating, so you can get full credit when you have your CRS verification. And again, these are the projects and the messages. Another way to say, okay, here are the topics that are covered. And then you go back and look at the messages. These are all of the list of the projects. And again, a lot of these are done for you by Monroe County. So just keep that in mind as well. Just the yellow highlighted ones are the ones that you're responsible for. Something else I want to remind you about, and I know we struggle with, because this PPI is somewhat outdated and was formulated before Irma. And we've had a lot of lessons learned since then, and we've changed a lot of the way we do messaging and warnings and so forth. But right now, the messages that we want to get ready and the products we want to get ready to have on hand, if we should be looking at a situation where we have a threatening storm, make sure you look at your PPI and you're ready for that should we need to be. Most of these are messages that are disseminated county-wide, since our Monroe County takes the lead on that. And of course, I'm going to be working with EM. I asked Jeff this morning if he would start joining, Jeff Manning, if he would start joining us for the PPI meetings as we go through the update. And I know Kristen too, for making sure we're coordinating the PPI with good messages, so these can just get disseminated. They're on the list, and we don't have to pull out the PPI right before a storm and make sure we're hitting all of those messages. We really want it to be the opposite. We really want these to be messages that are good messages that are going to go out prior to most storms anyway. Obviously, there might be some messaging that would have to change depending on the severity of what we're looking at. Hopefully, nothing at all this year. And then the after storm, we did do some work on several of these in 2018, right after Irma, because we knew we had perhaps missed the mark on some of these publications that we thought we were going to be printing out and handing out at re-entry, which we know that didn't happen. So we made some changes to that, and we'll talk about that just as a reminder for going forward into this storm season. And we have various handouts also in the flood response preparation, or what we were going to have ready for various handouts. That's an area that really needs work. Even I'm going to suggest one unified or maybe two unified handouts going forward, but just keep that in mind if we have to get ready for a pre or post storm event. We do have a list of handouts that I'm gonna show you that we decided on in 2018. And also, this is what I was talking about, this FRP number 7, which is the flood response preparation, those handouts in reentry. We sort of scrapped that whole thing. And also the handouts in various locations, FRP 6, both of those need a lot of work, but just look at them and make sure you're ready for this storm season. Should we need to implement this before it's updated? Does anybody have any questions about that? I know we've gone over it and over it and over it, but I have to pull it out every year and remind myself. So any questions? All right. And this is the 2018 change that we made via our progress report that we submitted to the CRS program through ISO. These are the publications that we substituted or thought might be good depending on the circumstances. We did say that we abandon the FRP number 7 in lieu of sending out the flood insurance claim handbook to all insurance companies right prior to a storm. So I did look up the flood insurance claim handbook. It was updated in 2017. That's the latest one that I could find. So just be sure that you have that on hand, and certainly we need to work on getting those addresses, the email addresses of the insurance company, of the companies that are doing business in all of Monroe County. Do we still have access to get that? Does anyone know? Can anyone help us with getting those email addresses again this year? Okay, I'll send out an email tag for everyone. Maybe someone can't unmute at the moment, but we're going to need to have those addresses again. Some of these publications, like the CERT disaster assistance checklist, I couldn't find. The business cards were something from Irma. I don't know whether those are available. So those might not be additional handouts that would be available to us this year necessarily. All of the others I was able to find, I was able to find and download and have readily available. If you want to save yourself from work and want me to Dropbox these to you, just shoot me an email and I'll do that. I hate to wait until we have an impending storm, because we all know how that goes. And you get 10,000 emails and we might not even have really good access to internet transmission. So I would suggest you have them at least ready in PDF format if you need to print them. Any questions about that? All right. Let's close this up.
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
Scott here, finally.
Hey, Scott.
Hey,
Okay.
does any of our propaganda relate to correlating flood insurance rates to the firms?
Not at this time, but we
Okay.
certainly can do that. That's certainly a good idea. I think we definitely need to update our messaging.
Well, I was thinking the opposite. I wanted to make sure we didn't, given that risk 2.0 is not going to be rated by the firms.
Whatever messaging we need to put out there as we're going forward. And I think we're going to be dealing with that for years to come. So keep that in mind, Scott, for what we want to do when we do the update to the PPI this fall.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we weren't already putting something out that said your flood insurance rates are rated to the firm, when that might not be the case in the year to come.
I'll double check that. I don't think there's a direct correlation. It might be call or check on insurance, but I don't know that I don't recall a direct, statement, but certainly we can check the outreach project. You can check your local outreach projects and I can check the ones that are countywide.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Good point, Scott. And then we'll make changes to that as necessary, and make sure communities that are, CRS coordinators that are here, make sure that, you're getting out the messaging that you want to be putting out there concerning the firms. You can always add messages to something that you're already paying to be put out there anyway.
Well, our next meeting would be what, 6 months from now?
No, I'm proposing, Scott, that we start with our update in the fall, like September.
Because we may have a whole new message that we need to develop.
Yes.
Sometime after October.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll talk about that here at the end, how we're going to go forward with that. All right, so we really kind of, I want to show you real quick Monroe counties. So we updated our outreach projects. As you know, last year we had an oops, and we told everyone who got the repetitive loss area brochure that their house had flooded several times. We only actually had blowback from 2 or 3 folks on that. And they were satisfied with it was a mistake in the verbiage. But our brochures, they're looking pretty fancy these days. They're not the ones that we had originally. And Monroe County's been able to tap into our resources to make these happen. Keep in mind that we are going to have stakeholders. Firm has been participating with us for the last 5 years and endorsing some of our outreach projects. So think about stakeholders. If stakeholders are great. If we can be thinking about who we want to pull in and ask to be stakeholders with us going forward, that would be terrific. But remember your stakeholders on your outreach projects, because that's how you get those stakeholder bonus points. This outreach, know your risk, it goes also endorsed by firm. Scott Fraser, actually, what the original brochure was his, and then we took and formulated that for the group. So this is the messaging that goes out to those insurance folks and realtors and those folks to make sure that they're telling their clients to know their risks. And then the outreach that goes to the special flood hazard area, or basically everyone in the community. And remember that we have said that the outreach that goes to the special flood hazard area must be endorsed by a local elected official. And that allows you to have the FIA credit, the CP, and the CIP credit, which gives you that extra bonus for activity 370. So that's really important that you make sure that you have that, you have something out there that's endorsed by a local elected official. And I've seen some really great examples of how folks are doing that. And we'll talk about that as we go through the update process. And your target letter to this, make sure you're getting this out, that goes to your realtors, your lenders, and your the other group.
Insurance agents.
Insurance agents, yes, that group. So this goes out to those folks. It's right here in front of me and I couldn't even read it. So that make sure this is what our Monroe County outreach looks like to those folks. As you know, this has to go out for your activity 320 for map information. And it also gets you some bonus credit in activity 340 for sending a brochure to the real estate industry to make sure they know to tell their clients to check before they buy. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to look at realtor.com or any of those listings lately, but they all now have a link that you can look up your flood zone. And that's to the maps that are currently in place. I don't know how that's going to work going forward, but right now, that's something we need to keep in mind going forward with the PPI too, and how we're going to take advantage of that and get some additional credit for basically the real estate industry linking to the ability to look up your flood zone to each and every property, which I think is pretty cool. Any questions about any of that?
Now, this is one of the reasons we asked the property appraiser to not identify flood zones on their records, at least not until we get through this.
Yeah, well, realtor.com does have that on there, as it stands today. It doesn't take into account any preliminary mapping or anything of that sort. I'm just throwing it out there. I have asked ISO if it qualifies for disclosure of flood hazard credit, and they said yes. So that might be something that we would want to look at in the future for adding into the PPI or not. But I'm throwing it out there for those folks who are coming up on visits that you might be able to capitalize on that credit. And if you don't feel it's appropriate for your community, by all means, that's certainly your program. So let's talk about the 2022 update and what that's going to mean to each one of us and why we need to get started sooner rather than later. I don't know how many communities are expecting a cycle visit in 2022. If you're on the phone and you're a CRS coordinator, if you are expecting a cycle visit in 2022, if you could speak up, I would greatly appreciate it, or maybe send me an email. And the reason I'm asking that is, if a community is having a cycle visit in 2022, they are going to have a copy of the updated PPI because it will be aging out in 2022. So we need to be sure that we're being cognizant of that as a group, that we're doing what we need to do for those communities who are cycling in 2022 and be ready. That's why I'm suggesting that we start the update process in September and November of 2021, so that in January, February of 2022, we will have a completed, approved document so that we can let the communities that need it have that for their 2022 cycle visit. Does that make sense? If you don't know, you can always reach out to Craig Carpenter. He is officially the the specialist for all of Monroe County communities, although he is actually handing off some of his work to specialists that live in other parts of the country. And that's for 2021. I don't know if that will be happening in 2022. We also need to coordinate again, I mentioned this before, more closely with Monroe County Emergency Management on the messaging for flood response, for pre-storm, post-storm, and also need to make sure that we're coordinating closely with our PIO, making sure that we've got good messages in place in the upcoming update. And I think this is a great time to start thinking about that, maybe making an ideas folder so that as things come across your desk or we think of messages we need to put out there, that we can discuss those when we start the update process. And I've also asked Jeff Manning and Shannon if they could participate closely with us in the months of September and November on the update process. Does anybody have, and Layton would like to be added. We talked about this before we voted to add them into the PPI. However, it was decided that it would just be better to wait at this point. Their cycle visit is already complete. So it would be better to wait until we do the complete update to add them in. And I am going to give you another plug for, while we're in the middle of this update process, we're still going to have to do a progress report for 2021. I am still going to have to do that report. I am going to start asking for your numbers very soon, because if I don't have them, it drags and drags and drags, because the report is really basically reporting out on how our insurance, how our messages are impacting different activities, and mostly insurance. So I need those numbers to include your community in the progress report. The progress report is critical to your credit. And if I don't have your numbers, then your community has a grayed out box where we're assessing how we're doing with our messaging. So please, 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 I know it's burdensome, and I know it's a pain with all the other things we have going on, but when you get those emails from me asking for those numbers, if you could get them back to me in a timely manner, I would greatly appreciate it. So we're going to be doing two things: updating the PPI and doing a progress report. So we need to be sure we're staying on top of those things, because we're going to be crunching all at the same time. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions about how you want to handle the update, alternate months, different sorts of meetings? How would you all like to handle that? I'd like to open it up now to discussion if anyone has any thoughts about how you want to handle the update process going forward. And it's September and November meetings, and we'll be prepared for them to be quite long. For those of us who have been with the process for a while, they're kind of think tank meetings with the final product going out for approval, and then final meeting in the January, February timeframe for 2022. No ideas? Okay. So we'll try to start coordinating for a September and November meetings. If you, again, have alternate folks that you want to send to those meetings, that you want to change your committee members, that's perfectly fine. I'm highly recommending that you have some alternates for the committee members, and try not to send, or try to think in light of the fact that if you get heavy on your local government committee members, that means that many more folks that you're gonna have to get from outside local government to attend the meetings when you're going through that thinking process.
And
All
just
right.
real quick, who is
Yep.
305-930-541?
That's Alina.
This is Mel as well. I don't think I had,
No, we didn't get, I don't think, I didn't hear the whole, what you were saying.
Yeah, I accidentally muted him. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Mel's here.
And Alina.
Hey, Brian, we can't give you the control. All right, so do I have this,
Oh,
do I
no,
have
no.
this, do I have this attendance list correct now? Scott's here. And again, if you're not on the list and you're joining us today, if you would please put your name in the chat feature, that would be terrific. Brian, can you see the chat? I don't have a button for chat.
Yep, I have it screen captured as well as the attendance, and I'll send that to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Brian, George, and the folks that help us get this set up on, really quick turnaround. I do anticipate that our meetings would need to be in person. How do you feel about that for September and November, or one virtual, one in person? I kind of do feel like those meetings need to be hands-on. What are your thoughts about those meetings? I have to prepare for travel if we're going to want to have them in person.
Lori, this is Mike Maurer.
Hi, Mike.
My only suggestion would be that if you have hard copy documents that we need to see and go over, then that would be the in-person meetings. A lot of the other stuff can be sent by emails or however.
That's true. We could set up a SharePoint. I actually think that through Monroe County, we can use OneDrive now for sharing. I know there's some potential issues with the Dropbox and local government sharing.
And then in the chat, Megan has the question of the brochures I'm working on are from December 2020. Are these the most updated ones?
No. But I'm happy to supply the most updated ones so Monroe County just got finished with their update process, updating, phone numbers, those kinds of things that have changed. Mayor made sure we had the mayor's, quote and just tidied everything up, made sure all of our links worked. So we just got done updating those. I'd be happy to send them to you. Keep in mind, though, as long as you're covering the messages that we've agreed upon, they don't have to be these exact brochures. They can be whatever your community wants them to be. They just have to be disseminated in the way we agreed to, and they have to include the messaging that we agreed to get full credit under the program. They can always have more messages. I always say take advantage of that messaging, because you're already spending the money to print and postage and all of that. So might as well put everything in there you need folks to know. Go ahead.
For what we do during these meetings, virtual is so much more convenient, but also for the non-governmental partners, trying to get them to take a chunk out of their day to come to a in-person meeting is a lot more difficult than getting them to sign on.
So is it the will of the group then to handle both meetings virtual? And then have an exchange point for the documents that we need to look at?
Works better for me since I'm in the Upper Keys. It's an all-day event to get down to Marathon.
Got it.
I'm completely fine with it all being virtual. This is Kristen.
Okay, Kristen. Kristen, yeah, and Kristen's been so fantastic with helping us with the brochures, and I'm sure she's going to be a great link. We're helping us with messaging as well. And folks, I'll be working with Kristen and Jeff at the county level, but you as your local governments may have, or your local needs may be a little different. So make sure you're thinking what we need to bring to the table. Like, Scott will definitely have ideas about what, coming forward for what he's dealing with in Key West that might be a little different than the overarching messaging that we would be doing as a county. So just keep that in mind going forward. Because if you don't have input into the PVI and the messaging, then you may be stuck with sending out messages year after year after year that maybe are not necessarily appropriate for your community, or you decide not to send them out at all, and then you don't get the CRS credit for them, which is, even we don't want that to happen at all. So, just if we're going to do this virtually, we'd have to get everything out for everyone to look at. And the first meeting would be a think tank kind of meeting. Let's come up with, what changes we need, what messaging, we need. And I've got some great ideas for some things that I've seen other folks do that are more unique. And the other thing that comes to mind is we're all dealing with sea level rise and what that's going to look like in our communities. And I think that, a lot of communities are going to that messaging. So I'd really like to also pull in the sustainability folks, at least to see if there's some messaging that we might need to be doing, going green, or how we can help, or those sorts of things that I know are things that are on the forefront of things that the Monroe County and the Keys in general are dealing with. So as you're thinking about going forward, remember that we can change 4 different message categories to make sure that we're capturing what we need to be capturing as a very unique community. So be thinking in terms of that. We pretty much, because this, the PBI was done so long ago, we pretty much just followed what everybody else was following. But I think we could break out and be forerunners with the kinds of messages we need to put out there for Monroe County and our communities. Does that make sense? I'm sure your heads are probably going, yeah, there are some things we'd really like to be messaging. We're tired of those same old messages that we've been putting out year after year after year. And it's concerning to me that I put out a brochure to 10,000 people that said, your house has been flooded several times. And, I got 4 responses from that.
I got the rest of them. They called me.
How many did you get really, Scott?
I got about a dozen.
Okay. 12 out of 10,000.
I can still complain about it.
Pardon?
It gives me legitimacy to file a complaint.
Yeah, I know. You filed. I hear you. I promise I won't do it again. Kristen and I both were like, okay, what was it that we did wrong last year? Let's make sure we don't do it wrong again this year. Last year was just a whole, I think maybe just in general, things were difficult last year, but we had a brochure that had the new mayor's quote, but the folks that we hired to send it out didn't wait for us to give approval for the proof and send it out with the wrong quote. And then, we had the oops on my part for having missed the fact that we had that language in there. I don't even know how that language got in there. I swear a gremlin changed that, because I can't imagine I ever sent out an outreach project that said that kind of thing. So, because that's in violation really of, FEMA's regulations on not disseminating any information about properties that have flooded several times, at least according to the insurance records. So, all right, anything else that we need to talk about before we have what was promised to be a brief meeting? No? Okay. Again, I really appreciate your participation. Please feel free to reach out to me with any ideas. And then, of course, we'll collate all of those and put them out there for public comment because this is a publicly invited or public meeting. And I would encourage you guys to publish these meetings on your website. So if you have local folks who want to join in, that they have the opportunity to do that.
Hey, Lori.
Mhm.
Hi,
This
this
is
is Mel.
I know.
How are you?
Good.
Are we? Do we? Is this a proper format to discuss impact of risk rating 2.0 on the CRS, if any?
If those folks, so what I'm going to do, yes, I think this would be a great format to do that, although I have gracious little information about that. Do you have additional information, Mel?
I believe I read somewhere, and again, there just seems to be a flood of stuff coming out on risk rating 2.0. It doesn't seem like a lot of it is relevant, and a lot of it is just fluff because the name that FEMA or the NFIP has chosen to give risk rating 2.0 is Equity in Action.
Yeah.
Which Scott Frazier loves.
Yeah.
But I had kind of heard that risk rating 2.0 was going to put CRS credits on an even footing for everyone. In essence, that tiers were going to be done away with. Have you heard anything like that?
I have, and I actually, FFMA, Bruce Bender has been joining our CRS committee. And if you're an FFA member, the CRS Insurance Committee meets once a month for 1 hour, and we're really focusing on the insurance side right now and risk rating 2.0. Bruce Bender joined us last month and sent out some information as it applies to CRS communities and how that's going to work, or at least right now, how they think it's going to work, or the answers that were given to ASFPM about how it was going to work. I can forward that to the entire group if you would like.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I guess my question going further is if I don't even know how to phrase the question, but what impact is that going to have on our committee if in fact they are going to smooth the CRS and not have tiers? What impact is that going to have on PPI, on ongoing just in general? Are the if they do away with the tiers, is that just going to be everyone's on the same footing without any kind of justification for it?
Well, from what I gathered from the answers that Bruce Bender received, the discount is still going to apply to almost everyone. The first iteration of what Bruce relayed to the group was pre-firm structures may not be getting the discount, to which I, couldn't unmute myself quick enough to say, well, then the CRS program is pretty sunk because, pre-firm structures are, at least in Florida, I mean, those are the ones that are, subsidized, or what he said was subsidized. So I guess that's a little different than pre-firm, but the ones that are subsidized, I always sort of think if they're getting the subsidized rates, that they wouldn't be. But that's not what actually came out in the answers that ASFPM got from FEMA. So I'm happy to send that to you, and you can, see if you can digest it and see what you think of the answers that that FFMA was given by ASFPM, because we're a partner to ASFPM. And I'm just saying the acronyms, thinking everyone's familiar with that. So there's a National Association of Floodplain Managers, which is ASFPM. They have become a powerful body in directing or commenting on lobbying for whatever needs to be done as far as the insurance side and floodplain management are concerned. And the local chapter of the same sort of folks are a partnering chapter with the national group. And, we're able to tap into a lot of that information that's being disseminated to the national group. And we've been really lucky to have Bruce Bender, since he's handling the outreach and meetings going forward, talking about risk rating 2.0 and how that's going to work.
Okay.
CRS is currently not making any comment on how that's going to affect the program, and just going forward with a 2023 rewrite of the program. I'm imagining, and they pushed it to 2023 to see where 2.0 was going to land. So, no good answer to how that's going to impact. I mean, they just put out an addendum in 2021 in January, made it retroactive basically, and added new activities. My head spins to think that in 2023 that would go through any major change. But we're told that elevation certificates are still going to be used to, at least the way Bruce explained it. There's behind the iron curtain or the wizard curtain that agents are going to be taught how to use this program, but they're not going to know how these things are formulated, but they're going to put in these numbers and then it's going to spit something out, but they'll like for a rating, but then they're going to have the opportunity to go back and fine tune that with elevation certificates and so forth. Have you heard any of that, Mel?
As an agent, I can tell you we have heard crickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on a conference, I want to say a week and a half ago, and FEMA, of course, is consistently speaking out both sides of their mouth on these issues. So the marketing spin is we're no longer going to require elevation certificates to rate policies. But then when you ask the question, well, how do I get credit for my house that's got some elevation to it? Oh, you submit an elevation certificate.
Yeah.
So, so we FEMA won't require them unless you want credit for the elevation that you do have, then you're going to have. So we're not requiring them anymore, but then you won't get the credit. Nice. Right.
Yeah, but then it's the program, is the CRS program going to still require the elevation certificates, which is the backbone of the program.
And then FEMA says their various data sets, quote unquote, are already going to have the elevation of the first finished floors of these buildings. And that if you don't agree with that, wherever they get those various data sets, then you can submit an elevation certificate.
That's what I heard too, Scott. That's what Bruce relayed to the group. Exactly that message.
It's all very vague, but it's supposed to be the best thing ever that happened to flood, which I highly doubt it.
Yeah, just like BW12.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the one little tidbit that we have heard is that if you're not happy with the risk rating 2.0 premium, you can always rate it based on the elevation certificate, and you can use the elevation certificate at least for the first year.
Mhm.
But again, we haven't heard. I haven't seen that in writing from anywhere. That's just, kind of coconut telegraph type of stuff.
Right.
That seems like a safety valve in case the whole thing implodes, just like BW12 did.
Well, I was just going to say,
Correct.
it kind of sounds like with the pre-firm properties that it's going to be a lot like the BW12, where if you're buying a new property, this is where I see the difference. I sat in on one webinar, so I need to obviously sit on more of them. But basically, if you're buying a new property, you can get the subsidized rates. But if you own the property and you let your policy cancel, that's where you're going to have a problem. That's the way I understood it. But again, I need to sit on a couple more of the classes that they're having.
We pretty much concluded locally that we're not going to know what's going to happen until they actually start writing under this 2.0.
I agree, because there's nothing in writing anywhere, and it just all seems very vague.
Yeah, and they think that they're going to have all agents trained by implementation October 1.
Started doing it.
Yeah.
They're not going to even give them the materials until September 1.
Exactly. That's what I heard.
That's great. I'd like to get trained. I'd like to know what
Right.
I'm supposed to do.
So, and there is, I had to miss it. I was signed up for the, ASFPM is having, I think every week, a seminar, a webinar, a 1 hour like lunch webinar thing on risk rating 2.0. So,
Lori, we can have all these webinars, and as Rebecca, I've only sat in on one. Until that software gets rolled out and we can actually go in there and start generating quotes, this is it's meaningless to me.
Yeah.
It's, until we can see it in black and white, what impact this is going to have. And from the preliminary spreadsheet that Scott looked at and distributed some, it ain't a pretty picture for Monroe County.
Other areas may benefit, just like they all benefit from the National Flood Program in general, but I don't think it's going to be good for Monroe County. I'm not feeling good in the one webinar that I sat in on. I was extremely nervous by the end of it.
Yeah.
I guess I would agree. The little I've heard about it, it's, of course, I wear the CRS hat. That's where I come from. I've been concerned a lot about that, how that's going to impact. So the program, even the interest of communities to participate in it, because if you're not, drawing down these heavy discounts, you're not going to get local governing bodies to buy into it anymore.
And some of the tools that they're using that they're supposedly going to rate under, they're pointing to this bright, shiny new car, but when you ask what's under the hood, they hem and haw a lot and won't give you any details. Like one of them is the replacement cost value of your homes. Well, anytime the feds try and estimate what our replacement costs here in the Keys, they're always wrong. So will we get to review that, how that's determined? No, we won't. Well, is it a standalone software? No, it isn't. It's part of the rating engine, so the agents won't see how it's derived. They'll just see the end result.
Right.
And then the distance from the flooding source, but they're providing distance to coast and distance to ocean, and they're significantly different in the sample they sent out. So I asked, what's the difference? They couldn't answer me.
Yeah, everyone shares the same concerns, and I don't know if hearing you all talk, it sounds like you've got a lot of information. I don't know if what Bruce sent is going to be any more valuable, but I will certainly put it out there. I have heard that the committee that meets, that I chair that committee, and basically that's what we've been talking about. I have now gotten Bruce and some others to handle the insurance side, because while we're talking about CRS, I'm good to go. While we're talking about how properties are going to be rated under 2.0, way out of my league. So the insurance has been real silent on that committee up until now. But, I'm happy to keep, sharing what we find out with this group. So we're, looking at messaging going forward. I think that what we need to do right now, in my opinion, is continue to move forward in the program as if the program isn't going to change. That's going to be a heavy lobby if they think they're going to strip the CRS program.
Agreed.
Most of the highest discounted, most of the highest participation as far as policy counts and coverage are concerned in the nation are in the CRS program. That's because they're the ones that benefit. They're the ones who can make it cost effective.
Right.
So I think they're going to have a little bit of an issue on their hands if they strip the CRS. Which, in my opinion, it depends on which groups, and I think, Mel, you mentioned this, which groups they decide are or are not going to get, or you said tiers, I guess you used the word, are going to get those discounts.
Right.
And if they choose a tier that involves a lot of policyholders, then that's going to be problematic.
Well, if the CRS discounts are what are prompting people to buy flood insurance other than a mortgage request for it, and those discounts get blended or reduced or taken, whatever it's going to look like, people are going to think twice about it. It's
True too.
I sat in yesterday on a Senate Banking Committee meeting that had some gentleman from FEMA, I forget what his name or title was, but he got grilled by Senators Menendez and Kennedy. Menendez and Kennedy were both, asking very pointed questions about the CAP models that are being used, the commissions that are being paid to write your own, and how much it's costing just to run the overall NFIP. So I don't know. I think when and if this thing hits, it's gonna. I think we're gonna see a replay of BW12.
Yeah. Was his name Marstead?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
What was his name? A white-haired gentleman. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So there's been a huge call for FEMA to step to the plate. And what I had heard through ASFPM was that it was Marstead was going to be the one put on the firing block. So apparently he was.
Yeah, he was. More like head on the chopping block, though.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't tune into any of that, but yeah, I had heard that was going to happen. They had to send a sacrificial lamb, as it will.
Yes, that is what it seemed like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I had heard. That was the word on the street, I guess you'd say. Okay, so yeah, Mel, keep us up to date too with what you find out. I mean, we could do a subcommittee out of this, looking at this sort of thing, or if somebody wants to take back up and try to get together some sort of a CRS users group where we could, talk about these subjects in detail for those folks who are interested. I think that would be like really terrific. I'm happy to help.
Between Rebecca and I, if we come across stuff CRS related, I'm sure we'll be happy to. I'm speaking on behalf of Rebecca, but I'm sure we'll be happy to just forward that on to you. To just kind of include in our in our discussions.
Right. Yeah. Right. And now we're going through all this expense of updating the flood maps and so forth. as a floodplain management tool now? Because if they're not going to be using those for ratings, I'm just so confused.
Scott has a great opinion on that.
Uh-huh.
On what they're going to be using the firms for?
Yeah, be nice, Scott.
No.
It's a public forum.
Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to use them for construction compliance.
Yes.
And lenders are going to need them to show that the buildings are there, whether or not they're in a flood zone for
Right.
coverage purposes.
Right.
That's all they're going to be used for.
So a document that was never meant to be a floodplain management document. It was always meant to be a insurance rating tool that somehow has been, I don't know, maybe handed to communities to use for their floodplain management purposes. But will those elevations actually get them the best rating?
Oh, won't have anything to do with their rating.
Well, but I mean, if they're going to build to, right, exactly. So you're going to make them build to an elevation or a construction foundation type that may not even have any implication for their rating.
You're going to ask questions like
Correct.
that, we should elect you to Congress.
I'm not asking, no, I'm sunsetting my career, not starting it. But anyway, all right. Thank you guys for your attention. I'm happy
did
to
you hear
say-
did you hear about the prior claims part?
No.
Oh, you'll like this part too. So starting out fresh, your prior claims won't affect your rates until you have a claim under your newly written policy. That claim will not affect your rates, but they will go back 20 years and apply your history to your new rate.
Okay. That should be interesting as well, because that's going to be a buyer beware kind of thing too.
That we don't know about, that they won't disclose.
Correct. And that they'll give to you, but you can't disclose it either.
Yeah, until after you bought the property and you bought a new policy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's problematic. I mean, I've said this all along. I mean, I'm in the middle of trying to develop a property. My son in DC, who is not in a flood zone right now, just is building a house, but its proximity to the water is a block away. Will he be able to afford those payments if risk rating 2.0 comes on and says, hey, because they're not in a flood zone, there's no elevation required currently, but they're a block from the water. So FEMA comes in and says, okay, here's your insurance policy and this is what it's going to cost you. Now he's completely can't afford the payment on the house he just built. Problematic.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. I think that when it really hits the public and folks begin to understand, I think you're completely right. It's going to be another implode BW situation. At least we hope so, right?
I'm pretty sure it will be, Laura.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear your guys' pain. I've thought about it from every way from Sunday, like, how is this going to work? But we'll just keep each other informed. And Mel, please feel free to use the format of this group, and that it maybe not officially PPI business, but the folks that are on our email list. You have the emails. You can certainly grab those. And folks, if you don't want to get Mel's emails, just say, please leave me off the list. But I think all of us, Rebecca, Mel, whatever you find out, we'd love to hear.
Who would not want to receive insurance-related risk rating 2.0 emails? I want to know right now.
So exciting. So exciting.
Yeah. Because you might not be on this committee in the future. No, okay. Yeah, well, it's all about that, Mel. I mean, this is all about the insurance for sure. I mean, this is what we're all working towards, is getting those discounts for our constituents. And if we can't do that, then
Exactly.
Yeah. My advice right now is just let's go forward as if we have blinders on to this, and as we gain information, we will definitely, implement that. And honestly, probably by the time the document hitting, final, we'll probably have a lot more information about how this is going to go. So that's pretty good timing, in my opinion.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, then.
All right. All right. I owe you a few things, and I'm going to ping you for CRS coordinators for, okay, do you know when your visit is? So we're sure that we can, get everything to you by that 2022 deadline. I'm going to send you the things, Bruce Bender, as a follow-up to this meeting. Okay. And I'll send you the outreach
Okay.
projects too, that the county's using.
Alrighty.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. We can officially adjourn our first meeting of 2021, and we will start working on dates for September and November of 2021 to get that update rolling. Thanks a lot, everybody,
Laurie,
for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you.
Bye.